Hey guys, welcome to Through the Bible Verse by Verse, a plain and simple study of the Bible, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse. We are currently in Genesis chapter 3, and we are moving now, actually, this study probably in the next study, but actually, right as of now, we are moving in a different um, stage. Okay, Adam is now going to feel his separation from God as a result of his sin. He is going to experience that separation, as will all mankind. So I'm not going to go back and spend the time. We did a lot of study on the serpent, and you'll remember there were three people who actually sinned in the garden: the serpent, Eve, and then Adam. Adam is the one who was the head, and thus it is Adam's sin that caused the curse and that caused us to be separated from God. Now, I want to, since we're going to be dealing with this idea of being separated, I want to go back and I want to mention something here because it's important at this point we understand it. And let's see, I'm going to go back to Genesis chapter 2, and I want to read from verse number 16. He said, "And the Lord God commanded the man, 'You are free to eat from any tree of the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for on the day that you eat from it, you will certainly die.'" Now, we will see that Adam will live another 930 years. So what does God mean here? In other words, was God wrong? Right? Did Adam eat and didn't die? Right? I mean, was he wrong? Well, no, we have to remember defining the terms of death. What is death? And there are three kinds of death mentioned in the Bible, used in the Bible primarily. Okay, I'm going to start with the third death because that's just the last death. It is the eternal death. But let me back up a minute here because let me bring something. The root definition of death is separation from. Separation from. That's the root meaning. So now when we talk about these three different kinds of death, that's what we're talking about. Separation from. Now the third death, that is the one that is yet to come for those who do not obey the gospel. They will be eternally separated from the presence of God for all eternity. Okay? And a lot of people don't like that, but they don't, the bigger question is, why are you disobeying the gospel of God in the first place? But anyway, that's what the third death means. The second death, second meaning, and we are all familiar with this death, and if not, maybe you're young enough, but maybe you live in I don't know, it's impossible almost to me to think somebody hasn't yet experienced physical death. Okay? Physical death. Now remember, death is separation from. So the third death, the eternal death for not obeying the gospel, is to be eternally separated from God. The physical death is our spirit and soul separated from our bodies. And as I said, we see it in the news. We all see that. When your spirit and soul is separated from your body, however that happens, sometimes it's violent, sometimes it's through sickness and disease or natural causes, right? And if you ever see a person dies, it's not like TV, right? It's nothing like TV. If you ever see someone die, you will know there's just something about a lifeless body. Okay, that's physical, the physical death. Okay, the physical death, separation from your physical body. All right, so the first death, and this is where we are here when God is commanding Adam not to eat of the tree. He says, on the day you eat from it, you will die. In other words, when you sin, Adam, you will die. When you sin, you will die. That's what he's telling him. If you eat the fruit. We talked about what sin is, right? You're rebelling against God. When you eat from it, you will die. So this is Adam's spirit and soul, or actually his entire being separated from God's life. And if you think about a plant, it could be a plant, it could be a tree, it could be a bush, whatever. Think about a plant that it's a tree. Let me use a tree. Its branches, right, extend out. They have leaves on them. So what's going on there? From the trunk, the branch is receiving life, nourishment. The leaves are receiving nourishment. Now, if you break a branch off, you're separating that branch from its life source. And we know that in a day or 2, 3 days, maybe weeks tops, that branch will wither up, right? The leaves will wither up. They will turn a different color. If there's fruit on it, the fruit will wither and die. We know that. That's kind of what spiritual death is. It is separation from God's life, God's presence. And as we kind of see here up at this point, Adam was connected with that. Adam lived in that presence. So now I want to kind of go back to that to understand when Adam sins, what he is now feeling, what he's going to actually feel, right? This is the death, spiritual death of mankind. The spiritual death of mankind. All right, so back in verse number let me start at verse 6. The woman saw that the tree was good for food and delightful to look at, and that it was desirable for obtaining wisdom. So she took some of its fruit and ate it. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of them both of them were open, and they knew they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made loincloths for themselves. So what we see is that all of a sudden there is a strange awareness. They were naked. Well, they were naked before. So why did they now, and it says, and they knew they were naked. Now this word knew or know is very interesting to understand sort of what's going on in this whole chapter here. Because God is going to mention this later on that at the end of the chapter. The idea that they will know good and evil, or they know certain things. And the idea of the word know is an experiential knowledge, right, which includes but not limited to everything that will bring knowledge. Okay, so here's a good example. You can tell your child, don't play on the stove, right? If you play on the stove, you'll get burned, and it's going to hurt because, man, when fire is hot. Now you're just giving your child knowledge, but they don't have enough knowledge or experiential knowledge. Now you don't want them to have that kind of knowledge, right? None of us. I don't want to know what it's feels like to be burned. There's a lot of things out there that I don't want to feel like, right? I don't want to experience. Okay? Good example. I don't want to experience COVID-19. Every person that tells me, every testimony that I read about COVID-19, they say you don't want to even experience. Even if you survive, you don't want to experience it. Okay? So I do what I can not to get it. All right? I've been vaccinated, and I'm going to try to be more knowledgeable when I'm around people, groups of people, etc. But because I don't want to experience it. Okay, so when he says right here, the idea of knowing this, so if your child plays on the stove and they get burned, so now not only do they have knowledge, but now some experiential knowledge is brought, right, to their table, and they know. That's the idea of the word know. We'll see this later on, because it's also this word know is going to be used in a sexual way between Adam and Eve. Same definition though. Same definition. But all right. So he said, but the eyes of them were open. And notice this phrase right here. Their eyes were already open, right? But he said then the eyes of both of them were open, and they knew they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made lion cloth for themselves. We'll get back to this because this is unacceptable. But the idea is that why? Think about it. They were the only two at this time on the planet, so why did they need to sew fig leaves to cover themselves up? It is also interesting to note that from this point on here, we see that nakedness is no longer just a natural occurrence, right? I don't know. I've never been to one, but there are those out there who have been to nudist camps, nudist colonies, and all that kind of stuff. Right here we see there is a change now from the time when Adam and Eve were naked to the point where now nakedness is not natural. It's sinful. Think about it. It brought shame and sin. Here's the thing right here. They are experiencing this alienation from God. This is what's going on. They're experiencing the alienation from God. Verse 8. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden at the time of the evening breeze, and they hid themselves from the Lord God among the trees in the garden. Now, what's interesting here, notice, they heard the sound. Prior, right, they experienced the presence of God. Now, God is distant, right? They no longer feel a oneness, right? They no longer feel a oneness. So he says they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden, which is amazing in itself, that God is walking in the garden, walking in the trees, among the gardens, among the trees. They hear the sound, but what is interesting, we see the effects of what? The consequences of sin. The alienation, right? The alienation of God, the alienation, the separation from God's life. And not only what we also see here, and I want to say this because this becomes very important here. Notice the fear. Why are they afraid? Right? No one has told them anything yet. What they know is that they ate fruit from a tree that God told them not to eat. And now they are afraid. Why? I want to say this because, I have these discussions. Sometimes I see people making these questions. Where's God? Right? Where's God? Oh, where is God? Or people say, I was angry at God. Okay? Well, let me just say this, and I want to make a statement here. God is merciful. So I want to say that because I do not want to sin against the Lord by misrepresenting his character. He is merciful. Okay? God is merciful. All right. So having said that, I want to now take on this thing that when people say I'm angry at God, I'm mad at God. I posted something on Facebook earlier, yesterday, and it was talking about the situation going on in Afghanistan. And so the question is, they're asking the question, where is God, right? And when people ask these kind of questions, or they get angry at God, God, why did you allow this to happen to me? Why did you allow these bad things to happen to me? Why did you allow this evil to happen to me? And then even further, you see people shaking their fists, really getting angry at God. Let me just say this right here. When you come into the presence of God, you will not be you will humble yourself. And I'm saying this because we're going to see this reaction that you see with Adam and Eve, hiding themselves in fear. Right? We're going to see this reaction throughout the Bible. Remember I said there's certain things throughout the Bible that we're going to see. Sin, the sinfulness of man. Adam's sin is not the only time we're going to see this. We're going to see it all the way to the end of the book of Revelations. And you will not find an example where people are arguing with God, shaking their fists at God, angry at God. Let me tell you what's on my mind, God. Never going to see that. And when people are angry at God and they're cursing God out or they're expressing their anger, right? Because God is not there. That's why. But you will not, if you're ever in the presence of God, you will not shake your fist at him. So, he says, then the eyes of them both were open, and they knew they were naked, and they sewed fig trees together and made themselves fig trees. And he says, and the man and his wife heard the sound of the voice of God walking in the garden at the time of the evening breeze. And they hid themselves from the Lord among the tree in the garden. Now I'm going to get into again the consequences of sin. I'm going to get into the how God makes pronouncements on it. But this, what we see here is Adam feeling the maybe not even realizing it, but he's feeling the alienation, the separation from God's presence. All right, guys, I will pick this up in the next study, and I'll see you then.